Hello friends, welcome back to the second part of my lecture that is titled Environmental Concerns, Ecocriticism and Indian English Literature. Just a short recap of what we did in the part 1. We had discussed about the environmental concerns, the environmental disasters and the degradation, how it affects the nature and human life, and how we can relate it to literature. Now I am going to take up eco-criticism, which is the second part of this lecture. And as you can see on your screens, I have taken a question that Glenn A. Love puts in his article, Revaluing Nature. And perhaps this question must have been in the minds of the critics when they started discussing the importance of nature in literature. So the quotation goes so, how can the discipline of English, which purports to deal with the human value systems of the past and the present, which seemingly engages literary representations of our relationship with our surroundings, and which thus both influences and is influenced by that relationship, fail to address such issues? So he puts this very pertinent question where he says that when he implies that literature should have been responsible, literature should have answered the questions related to ecology in their writings earlier and not so late. So what is eco-criticism? First we come to the coining of the term, which William Howarth has given, and he says, I take the quotation from him, eco and critic both derive from Greek oikos and kritis, and in tandem they mean house judge. Here oikos is nature and kritos is an arbiter of taste who wants the house kept in good order, no booths or dishes strewn about to ruin the original decor. The original decor is the original way the earth was created. So the house judge. Then eco-criticism is a way of pondering over and finding exclusivity in literature, keeping the focus on our ecology or environment, which originated in 1970s. The term was first used in 1978 by William Rueckert in his essay, and you can see the quotation that has been given over here. He says that eco-criticism, he defines it as such, application of ecology and ecological concepts to the study of literature. But since by ecology Rueckert meant the scientific connotation of the word and thus is confining, a very prominent eco-critic, Cheryl Glotfelty, in her edited book, The Eco-Criticism Reader, gave a very precise definition of the term. She says that eco-criticism is the study of the relationship between the literature and the physical environment. And as far as I am concerned, I think that this definition also is a little vague, because the meaning of physical environment does not necessarily include the nature only or the ecology only. It can include other things as well. But eco-criticism is, specifically about the natural environment. So you can see that this definition can be a little problematic. So the attention towards the ecological issues, you can say that the attention given to such issues in literature, it perhaps started in 1960s with the publication of Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. And this is a landmark book. It's a canonical work as far as environmental writing is concerned, where she talks about the negative effect of the pesticides that we use on the environment and how it destroys the environment, the natural environment around. Again, coming back to Cheryl Glotfelty, she says that ecocriticism, these are further writings, some short, sentences that I have taken for your understanding. She says that ecocriticism is an earth-centered approach. It is not human-centric, but it is earth-centric or ecocentric as well. She talks of the complex intersections between environment and culture, and further she says that human culture is connected to the physical world, affecting it and affected by it. So, but whatever she says, we do agree with her as far as the physical environment is concerned. We definitely have a little problem with that. So for more, exclusive definition, we look towards Professor Scott Slowit, who is a professor at University of Nevada, Reno, USA. And he delivered a keynote address in the 4th World Conference of World Association for Studies in Literatures in English in 2004 at Madras Christian College, Chennai, where he defines the term, where he defines ecocriticism as, he says that the study of explicitly environmental texts from any critical perspective, or the application of various environmental lenses, ranging from scientific ecology to the language and terminology of environmental justice scholarship, to any kind of text, even material that presents no obvious statement about the more than human world. And this term he borrows from David Abram, who is a philosopher as well as an environmentalist. More than human world, or the relationship between the human and the non-human. Professor Scott Slowik has given a very expanded view, and I think we need to be, and must be generous enough as far as ecology is concerned, and accept any text that either foregrounds the environment or is analyzed with an environmental lens as a literature about ecology. For example, we would consider the texts which portray nature writing as eco-literature, but a text which has no portrayal of nature but exposes the social and political forces as annihilating or assailing nature also would fall under the premises of ecocriticism. I come over to Lawrence Buell. You can see the second quotation on this slide. He writes in The Environmental Imagination, he says that finding better ways of imaging nature and humanity's relation to it is ecocriticism. A very good definition by Peter Barry, we all know him. The ecocentric reading, by contrast, focuses outside on the house and its environs rather than the inside on the owner and his psychology. So again, he targets in his priority list, the owner and his psychology is number 2, the environment is at number 1. So what do we study under ecocriticism? We have 3 sections: nature writing, environmental literature, and eco-literature. Let us first discuss nature writing. Nature writing, however, does not satisfy the eco-critics. They are not able to conciliate with this term, as it rarely formulates an active connection between the ecology and humans. It is descriptive in nature, they say, and is devoid of point of view but is still a useful terminology because I quote Glenn Love over here in his essay Revaluing Nature, again taking the quote from there. He feels that nature-oriented literature offers a needed corrective for one important aspect of this literature is its regard, either implicit or stated, for the non-humans. He feels that ecocentric literature has been ignored by the anthropocentric ego-conscious literature. And he gives example of two texts by Hemingway. He takes the example of The Sun Also Rises and The Old Man and the Sea. And he says that The Sun Also Rises is mostly taught in higher education institutions because it is an anthropocentric text, while The Old Man and the Sea has largely been ignored because it is an ecocentric text. And some like Patrick Murphy have welcomed this term and accepted it wholeheartedly. Now coming over to environmental literature. This is an accepted term, but it too has its limitations because of its lack of ecological universalism or holism. Cheryl Glotfelty has some reservations to calling eco-critical texts by this name because she feels, I have taken this quotation from her, she says that in its connotation, enviro is anthropocentric and dualistic, implying that we humans are at the center, surrounded by everything that is not us, the environment. I hope you can understand this. She says that environment or environ, if you look into the dictionary, you will find anything which surrounds us. So the human is at the center, having a center, so the human is at the center. So she says that this environmental literature or environment is not an acceptable term. Lawrence Buell, in his book The Environmental Imagination, Thorough Nature Writing and the Formation of American Culture, also mentions that environment consists of man-made and natural environment. So any term that is not purely ecocentric is not readily acceptable to the eco-critics. Eco-literature is perhaps the best terminology. I would take a definition from Buell over here, who says that relationship in any work which is ecocentric, the relationship should be between nature and man, and not the vice versa, not between man and nature. So he gives his attention more to nature. His emphasis is more on nature rather than man. Okay, so eco-literature is perhaps the best suited terminology for the eco-critics, as it proposes to study the relationship between nature and man, and not between man and nature, as we just in the previous slide I had talked about. Eco-literature is ecocentric and not egocentric. It keeps the focus on the subalternity of the ecology, on the betterment and upliftment of the ecology, and on to paying utmost regards to ecology. In the process, though the gains of humans are not to be kept in mind, we benefit to further our survival chances and of avoiding such ecological catastrophes as we are facing now. So, eco-literature, as Buell, again the same work, The Environmental Imagination, he attributes the following considerations for a text to be oriented ecologically, and I take these points from there, where he says, the non-human environment is present not merely as a framing device, but as a presence that begins to suggest that human history is implicated in natural history. Coming over to the second point, he says that the human interest is not understood to be the only legitimate interest. 3. Human accountability to the environment is part of the text's ethical orientation. 4. Some sense of the environment as a process rather than as a constant or a given is at least implicit in the text. So these are the core features of eco-literature. The nature present in it should not be referential, but so very twined with the human world that the existence of the human world be negated without its presence. I would like to quote here from Wordsworth's poem Tintern Abbey, which I think all of must have read to support this point, where he tells about the nature's omnipotence and its prerogative to make us listen to the still sad music of humanity, nor harsh nor grating, but of ample power to chasten and subdue, though of ample power to chasten and subdue. The second point also can be seen emphasized here. Human interest is perceived in the quote, but that is not the desired result. The nature aspires definitely to purify and humble the unrestrained soul of the humans, thus proving its sovereignty over humans. There is clear indication that nature encompasses man, but the vice versa is not true. Coming over to the third point, where Buell says that human accountability human accountability to the environment is part of the text's ethical orientation. So, we can refer to the COVID-19 situation that we are facing for the past 1.5 years, because COVID is not a self-creation of nature, but is a consequence of the ego consciousness of humans. I would like to give you another example of Melville's Moby Dick and Coleridge's The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. I think everybody must have read this. These are distinguishing examples of this. The lesson for us is clear. If man considers himself as just a minute part of an all-engulfing, ecosystem, then he has chances of survival. But if he thinks he is the master to all, then he should get ready for the apocalypse. Buell's fourth point, where he says some sense of the environment as a process rather than as a constant or a given, is at least implicit in the text. It highlights the necessity of nature being present as a character with the attributes of adaptations and not just a mute spectator in the narrative. Nature should be present like the Wessex of Hardy. Okay. Another very important aspect that we study in eco-criticism is deep ecology. And this is a term given by the Norwegian philosopher R. Nace in 1973, where he lays emphasis on the inherent value of nature and its living beings for its own sake and not for the sake of humans. It was a movement with the target of shaping the policies, keeping in mind the intrinsic value of all lives, not just of humans. They were in opposition to the deep ecologists. They were in opposition to the shallow ecology of other environmentalists of those times who were concerned about ecology for the benefit of humans. The deep ecology is, it supports the concept of a self that is not in isolation, but is deeply connected and is a part of the soul of the whole natural world. And this he calls as the ecological self. This is within inverted commas, the ecological self, which when realized concedes to the ethics of the ecology, thus putting an end to the exploitation of the natural world. Okay. Now we come over to the stages of criticism, eco-criticism, which needs to be, very minutely distinguished from the waves of criticism, eco-criticism, because normally speaking, we have two waves without any, distinguishing line in between them. The first wave talks of portrayal, and the second of theory. And the stages of criticism I have taken again from Cheryl Glotfelty, where she equates eco-criticism with the theories of feminism, the three stages of feminism. She talks of first stage, that is the stage of representation and portrayal, which, as feminism is concerned, how the women were portrayed, like the witches, bitches, broads. In the same way, the environment has been portrayed as Eden, Arcadia, virgin land, miasmal swamp, savage wilderness, and even the absence. There is absence of portrayal of nature. The first stage or the first wave lays emphasis on nature writing. I have written some names over here of the transcendentalists. You can see the names on the slide. Then coming over to the second stage, where again, if you equate it with feminism, Cheryl Glotfelty talks of the second stage, which is the most important stage, stage of conscious raising, rediscovering, reissuing, and reconsidering. And this is to recuperate the neglected genre of nature writing and nature-oriented writing, which boasts a rich past, a vibrant present, and a promising future. And coming over to the third stage talks of the stage of theory, which is far-reaching and complex, draws on wide range of theories to raise fundamental questions about eco-criticism. I just spoke about Cheryl Glotfelty's equating feminism with eco-criticism. So what we further study under eco-criticism is eco-feminism, and you can say that it is a branch of eco-criticism where we equate the women with nature. So just a short description of what this means. This term was coined by, as you can see on this slide, Francois de Eubon in Ecological Feminism in 1974. Ecofeminism did not gain momentum as a philosophy until the late 1980s and early to mid 1990s. And the premise of ecofeminism is connection between oppression of women and domination of nature, because the patriarchal dualism places women and nature in the same lower category, and hence oppression of women should be focused to elevate the status of nature. If you remember, I had taken a quotation from Ban Ki-moon in my first part of the lecture. So you can relate these points to that quotation over there. And the implication is that women's ethics are closer to ecology than man's. They say that most of the movements for the conservation of nature have been started by women. Another thing that I would like to talk when we are talking about eco-criticism is eco-imperialism. And I have taken, it's a long quotation, it's a long definition that I have taken from the Oxford reference. And it talks that this theory has been propounded or conceived by Alfred Crosby in his 1986 book, Ecological Imperialism, the Biological Expansion of Europe, 900 to 1900. This is the title of the book. And this proposes that colonization was not only a form of cultural and political tyranny, it was also a form of environmental terrorism. Indeed, Crosby goes so far as to argue that the ecological dimension was in fact primary. You know, it wasn't, the colonization was not just political or cultural, but primarily it was the ecological domination. His reason for suggesting this is the evident fact that wherever colonists settled, they brought with them diseases that devastated the local populations of both people and plants and animals, as well as invasive pests and weeds that encroached on the existing flora and fauna and eventually starved them out of existence. European-style agricultural practice utilized in dry regions, he has given an example of this, like Australia and South Africa, has had a catastrophic environmental impact. Crosby's work has sparked an enhanced interest in the role and significance of the environment in understanding colonial history in post-colonial studies. And I would like here to refer to one example from The Glass Palace by Amitav Ghosh, where he tells us how the Britishers, they used to cut wood from the forests of Burma. They used to load them on elephants. They used the river for transporting the woods. So they were using animals against nature, nature against nature, and in the course destroying the ecology of Burma. Eco-imperialism is all about, to put it very simply, it is all about the domination of the third world nations by the first world nations in the name of green agenda. We are told to cut our use of air conditioners and so many other things which contribute towards environmental degradation. But the first world has enjoyed all those, comforts, and when those comforts come to the people of the first world, they say that you have to cut down on all these things. And what is green agenda? I take a quotation from Professor Deepak Lal, who is a professor at the University of California, Los Angeles. He says that he defines green agenda in very simple terms. He says that it is to impose on the world, and especially the developing world, a green socialism in which they alone determine energy, resources, lifestyle, and other economic and social dimensions at every level. So I hope you can understand what eco-imperialism is. Now, when you read any text, how do you analyze it as a text on eco-literature or a text of eco-criticism? How do you eco-critically analyze a text? I have put certain questions over here. How is nature represented in this text? How has the concept of nature changed over time? How is the setting of the play or a film or a text related to the environment? What is the influence on metaphors and representations of the land and the environment on how we treat it? How do we see issues of environmental disaster and crisis reflected in popular culture and literary works? How are the animals represented in this text, and what is their relationship to humans? How do the roles or representations of men and women towards the environment differ in this play or any film or any text? Where is the environment placed in the power hierarchy? We talk of this hierarchy as well. How is nature empowered or oppressed in this work? What parallels can be drawn between the sufferings and oppressions of groups of people? As I'm trying to refer to my first part of the lecture, I said that whenever any environmental casualty takes place, the worst sufferers are the poor and the women, the children and the old people. So what parallels can be drawn between the sufferings and oppression of groups of people, women, minorities, immigrants, etc., and treatment of the land? What rhetorical moves are used by environmentalists, and what can we learn from them about our cultural attitudes towards nature? So this ends the second part of my lecture, in the third part of my lecture, I am going to talk about the Indian English literature and how Indian English literature deals with environmental concerns would be the third and the last part of my lecture. So in a while, thank you.